You're
hey, friends,
here.
you found us.
You're back. You have made it through to the final session before our keynote, which we cannot plug enough. Please hang around for the keynote. It is going to give you the lift that you need, the final. But we are here to talk about disrupting, growing, adapting, and repeating. And we are future-proofing our organizations. I'm Becky Endicott. I'm with We Are For Good. This is my co-founder, John.
Hey, I'm John.
And we want to know who you are. So put your name in the chat. Let us know your organization. But I got a question for you. Are you in your organization doing anything to pivot or respond to the emerging challenges, things that are popping up in the world, and how do we future-proof our organizations? If you have a cadence of this built into your culture, we want to know about it. P.S., we want to celebrate it. So drop that in the chat. Tell us who you are, and we want to welcome you.
Seriously, friends, we've learned so much just from following the chat. So please lean in on, especially on this last session. But if this is kind of striking a nerve with you, it's a value for us. Literally at our company, we sat down before we started We Are For Good, and we said, where do we see the breakthroughs in our nonprofit careers of 15, 20 years on the field? And it's this idea of the evolution, the idea of how do we continually grow? And that's what this conversation is about. It is a future-proofing session, but it's also about innovating and doing it in community. So the panelists we've gathered, y'all, we got to get to them because they are so dang good. Like we just saw them in the green room.
Whoa,
they're hyped and they're bringing the goods. So we got to jump in.
Okay, first one right out of the gate, we have got the incredible Amy Freitag. She is the president of the New York City Community Trust. She joined the trust just about 2 years ago as the fourth president in the organization's 100-year history. Previously, she was at the J.M. Kaplan Fund, which is a New York City-based family foundation, and she is really working to redefine the trust, make it modern, make it human, and she really wants to get a new generation of supporters in who want to make a difference in their hometown. And Amy's mantra is to showcase the joy of giving. Clearly, she is based in New York City. Amy, we're so happy you're here.
Hi, friend. Oh my gosh, we've got the laughter, we got the applause. It's so good. Okay, got to break out the jazz hands. It's time for Nelvin Johnson. He is one of the greatest We Are For Good community members that has just poured into this work. He's the development officer at the Bowery mission, a mission also based in New York City that we love, that's pouring into helping New Yorkers combat homelessness and hunger since 1870. Y'all, I had to double check my notes to make sure that's right. But Nelvin is this incredible storyteller. He has a passion for serving the vulnerable, and he's an eternal optimist. He's home at We Are For Good, but he had this career shift. I mean, he had a really wonderful career in finance on Wall Street. So I love the new energy that he is chasing his passion and pouring into. So we had to add him onto this panel. He's based also in New York City. It is good to see you, my friend, wherever you are.
He's coming on. Hey, Nelvin.
There he is.
Good to be here.
Good to see you. Okay, we have got one of our favorite humans that we have interviewed on the podcast, Erin Davison. She is the president and CEO at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southwest Louisiana. You are going to love her accent. You are going to love her insight. And she is a brilliant seasoned 25-year veteran in the space, working in fundraising, donor engagement. And she has grown Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southwest Louisiana. It's so exciting. I can't even get the words out, Erin. Southwest Louisiana to the region's largest donor and volunteer mentoring network. And I got to say, the quote that resonates with me most is she says, I love this work so much. I am so fired up about it that I want my boots to hit the ground in the morning and I want the devil to say, oh my gosh, she's awake. Erin, welcome to the stage. We're so excited you're here.
Okay, y'all remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You have the phone a friend option. That is Brooke Richie-Babbage.
Yep.
She is our phone a friend. Not only is she just this incredible consultant that we know today in the space, leading Bending Art Consulting, she hosts the Nonprofit Mastermind podcast. You need to join her email list. I'm telling you, she delivers leadership tips that are broken into 1, 2, 3, do this, not that. And she's just one of those people that gets it. She had this really incredible career where she had led nonprofits for many years, and now she's coaching and she's pouring into people. So she's really in touch with the problems we face, but also how we can build sustainably. And so we love Brooke, BRB as we call her. She's based in Brooklyn and is an honor to share stage with you, my friend. Welcome.
Okay, we got to dive into this. We are going to start with that core value, number 7, for We Are For Good. Let's talk about the case for disruption. And Amy, I'm going to go to you first because I think a lot of people think of these historic organizations as sort of being stuck in the past, and you have done the exact opposite. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about some of the hallmarks of becoming a future-proof organization, because you are stewarding this 100-plus-year-old organization and making it so relevant to the now. Talk to us about that.
I am so excited to be here. And you know, I love talking about this more than anything. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm super excited to spend time with Nelvin, Erin, and Brooke. So grateful for this. Look, I'm just super honored to be the president of this extraordinary organization, one of the oldest community foundations in the country, one that was carefully constructed by my predecessors to be future-proof. And they did that, I think, by being innovative over 100 years. For example, I don't think we talked about this before. Newsflash, 1931, the first donor advised fund. Yay!
Wow.
Yeah. And now look, talk about having a seismic impact on philanthropy. 2 million funds across the country held by public charities, including 800 community foundations. So, that's why actually this past week I've been in Washington, sort of trying to defend the Donor Advised Fund as a great democratizer of philanthropy. Because let's face it, many of those 2 million funds are held by people that could never afford to have a private family philanthropy or private foundation, right? So these are donors, many of whom make really pretty modest contributions. I will say that our average staff donor grant is only $1,500, and maybe the balance is only $50,000. But you know what? They're paying out at 20%. 15 to 30% relative to private foundations. So these are people, this idea that people are sitting on resources, we don't see that in our donors. We see school teachers, firefighters, cab drivers making funds to put their dollars to work in New York City. So look, that's just one piece. And what we do, and here's my thing, and you guys know this, I am a big believer that nobody knows what the heck a community foundation is. So whenever I have an audience like this, people, I'm going to go for it. But right, so we've been holding these donor advised funds, but we've also been holding what we call permanent funds for 100 years. And what's a permanent fund? Those are things that are left to us in a will, right? And what we do is we stitch those various funds, in this case, 2,300 funds in New York, and it's 8 counties. We serve Westchester to the east end of Long Island, and we stitch those together to create this kind of crazy quilt of generosity that wraps around 12.4 million New Yorkers across the 8 counties. So, and that's what I think makes us future-proof, right? It's particularly those permanent funds. And I may have shared this anecdote with you, but I'm going to do it real quickly. So if you loved theater 100 years ago in New York City, and you loved entertainment, there was one entertainer you knew, and his name was David Warfield. And he was the wealthiest entertainer in the world in 1920. Fast forward, last decade of his life, he becomes blind. And he is so struck by the loss of vision that he leaves a fund at the New York Community Trust, millions of dollars in 1951, to help people with vision loss and blindness. Fast forward today, we've made tens of millions of dollars of grants in David Warfield's name. We are the largest funder of disability in the region. 90% of our dollars we put on the street every year are because of David Warfield. So if you love your community, you want to leave a permanent fund at the New York Community Trust or whatever your community foundation is, because that makes your nonprofit vision for your city future-proof. So, and then, you won't be surprised to know that no one died 15 years ago to say, you know what you should do? You should fight climate change. Or, you know what you should do? You should close the Rikers Island. And so that's why we need living donors, donor advised funds, working with those permanent funds to come together to solve the issues we're trying to combat today. And that has real power. If I look at Nelvin, we have made something like 117 donor advised fund grants to the Bowery mission in the last 25 years, which comes to like hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So it's the power of collective action. And that's what I think makes us so powerful. But man, do we need to do a lot of work, technology, engaging new donors, putting a fresh face on our organization. You'll see all that happening this year. And, it's work that needs to be done so people know who the heck we are. So that's my pitch for future proof. Invest in your local community foundation and make it as permanent as you can.
I mean,
I'm
you
from
made us believers.
Oklahoma.
We
I
got
want
you.
to like put a fund in New York. That means save me salty.
Let's do this. Okay. But I love that you talk about this patchwork quilt. Like I really do believe in this mosaic that y'all have created that is really surrounding with such care and love for the city. So, okay, Brooke, I got to kick it to you because we're talking about sustainability. I feel like this is one of the things we love to jam about with you because
Absolutely.
it's not just about sustainability of our mission. Like we always go back to like
Right.
sustaining ourselves as leaders. I mean, if we're going to be future proof, we got to take care of ourselves. What does this stir up in you? I mean, you as we kind of lead into this combo.
Absolutely. First, I love the question because as we've talked about, if we don't prioritize sustainability, we're going to burn out. I don't think it's an accident that we are seeing incredible leaders across our sector tap out. Just say, I can't do this anymore. I loved it when I started. I love the mission and I am done. And I think that is tragic. I think when we have strong nonprofits and social impact organizations that are on the front line of fixing what's broken in our society gets better. And when those leaders can't sustain themselves, our society loses. So this is, as you know, deeply personal for me in the coaching that I do. I was talking to a leader the other day who started crying as she was describing that she'd lost this sense of connection to her mission and why she had started. And she was afraid. She wasn't even crying because she'd lost it. She was crying because she was afraid she'd never get that back. And so a lot of what I do with the leaders that I work with is around this question of sustainability. And I think the answer is twofold. I think it's both personal and structural. I think it's about making sure that we have the personal resources, that we are honest about the personal resources we need, and that we have them to keep moving forward without feeling like we're grinding. And I think it's about making sure that we invest in the infrastructure around us to support us in doing that. When I talk with the leaders that I coach and support about this sort of duality, this two parts of sustainability, we talk about things like, on the personal side, identifying and leading from your zone of genius, right? Knowing what puts you in that state of flow. I've heard it, Shonda Rhimes calls it being in the hum, right? When you're working hard, right? We know this is hard work, but it doesn't feel like a grind. It feels like it's coming from some universal force that you're tapping into. And when you're in that flow, you can sustain yourself, right? So how do you find and lead from that? How do you build your crew, right? Your network of guidance and mentorship and accountability, the people that you can be vulnerable with and fall down in front of. Usually for me, this was other executive directors who understood what I meant when I called and shared a story that only maybe someone else in my role would get, right? How do you build that crew to sustain yourself? At the same time, we talk about, with these leaders, organizational resilience. And I don't necessarily mean mission resilience. I mean structural resilience that supports the leader in doing the work. Do you have the right people in the right roles? Right? Do you have the right team? Do you have systems in place? And I am a, Virgo INFJ, as Becky knows, total, trapper keeper, Post-it note girl. So I think a lot about systems and processes, and they're not sexy, but they actually matter, right? When we think about sustaining people and doing their work, have you arranged the building blocks of your organization in a way that will allow it to be stable? So for me, this question of personal sustainability is both about us as individuals in our roles and organizational. I think they're both really key.
I knew you were going to say that. Now everyone knows why we love BRB. And I mean, you were the first person to bring in this concept to me of like sustainable sisterhood and getting your squad around you, because no one needs to go into this work alone. I am so overjoyed
Absolutely.
to say that BRB is in my sustainable sisterhood, and we welcome anyone in. You don't have to be a sister to come in. But I think one of the through lines, we've heard flow several times already today. And it's like, how do we get back to that center of why we love this work? How do we embrace it differently without losing our humanity? And Nelvin, I just think you have such a unique purview to this, because after 10 years on Wall Street doing finance, doing sales, you jump back in, you have this desire to really do something that is deeply meaningful in your work. And so I think it gives you a unique lens into what holds this sector back? What keeps us from future proofing? How are we limiting ourselves by not embracing risk, failure, innovation? What are some of the things you've seen as you've kind of come into the sector in the last couple of years?
Oh, so much, Becky, so much. I'm really grateful for this time, and I'm really grateful for this conversation, because I don't think it's one that we can have enough. I think we need to be having this conversation more. I think we need to be having it more consistently with more people, with our internal staff, with their donors. But for me, I think the biggest thing that holds our missions and sector back are threefold. At least that's what I see. I think it's fear of failure, like you said, a scarcity mindset, and tempered vision. And I'm going to touch on all three. But even before I start, here's the thing. A lot of this is not our fault. So I need us to embrace that first. This is it's been this way for generations. For so long, the social sector has been held back and held captive almost by these oppressive rules that hold us back from explosive growth and keep us from fulfilling the true scale of what our missions can and should be. And if you haven't heard Dan Pilato's TED Talk on it, or movie Uncharitable, I'll link it later, but an absolute necessity. Going back to fear of failure, we're so bogged down, right, with endless tasks that we don't leave any room to think outside the box and experiment. We're so scared of failure. What if this donor sees us fail? What if this board member doesn't like what we're doing? I wish we could just have big signs everywhere that just says failure is part of the process. It's a detour on the way to something greater. So I think the question we need to ask is, how can we foster a culture where failing is okay if we're all learning from it? And then to touch on scarcity mindset, I have a lot of resources on this. So if you want more, feel free to connect with me offline. But the scarcity mindset it's one that's driven by a fear of that failure, criticism, and loss. It believes that there's not enough to go around, not enough funding, not enough volunteers, not enough skills or opportunities, right? But when you compare that to a growth mindset, the growth mindset really believes in the ability to learn, to adapt, and to create new resources. Believes there's enough resources and opportunities to go around for everybody to succeed. It fosters partnership and sharing, and it embraces innovation and risk taking. I know I said that before. It wasn't our fault. Things are the way they are. But when we start thinking about tempered vision, right now we have the resources. So now I feel like it is on us. Now we know better, so we can do better. Yes, we're strapped down by a million things on our to-do list, but what if we dedicated 30 minutes a week to just start thinking about and dreaming about what innovation and dreaming boldly actually looks like for you and for your organization? One of the biggest questions I always ask is what if instead of giving our program teams a bare bones budget to work with and telling them that they can only do what fits inside X, what if we asked them what they really needed to do the work they really want to do, to not only grow in scale and to depth, because I think the real vision, the one that we want to communicate, the one that's really going to propel our missions forward, starts there. It's the one that's supposed to get communicated to our staff, our boards, and our donors. There's a famous Chinese proverb that says the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? And I feel like if you care deeply about growing your mission and your impact, you've likely thought about how to make things better. So I think we just need to ask ourselves, what is it? What is that's holding us back from taking those steps forward?
Y'all, I just feel like it's we've got the old mindsets, the old things, and y'all are 1-2 punch. I'm ready for an uppercut,
Totally.
Erin, as you jump into this conversation. I think you do this really well, that you show up with just this sense of urgency. And I know your mission just calls for that, and you've had some experiences that have pushed that too. But how can we all embrace this mindset that we have this urgency to adapt and evolve? We can't just keep talking, right? We got to get out the door.
Yeah, I mean, you think about our world that we live in is consistently moving at warp speed. And if we don't, again, I don't think we can all move at warp speed, but if we don't acknowledge that the world is going to evolve and it's going to keep moving, and we have to try to reach those benchmarks and goals in real time with, of course, the assets and the resources we have. And I am a jump in first, figure it out second type person, and which is probably not healthy, but that's how I lead my organization. And my team that I have, we all sort of have that sense of urgency, because one, we mentor youth. And if we're lagging behind in our vision and mission of delivery with our youth, then somebody else is mentoring them. And that's not probably the best situation, depending on if it's positive or negative. So whenever we have to adapt and overcome, we also have to improvise. And, we hear that a lot: adapt, improvise, overcome. And for us, it's just a matter of staying in tune to what we need to do, but also, like Nelvin said, always have in the back of our mind that projection and that future of how are we going to get there? Yes, we're doing A right now, B's tomorrow, but where can I get to E? And how can I connect those dots? And just with technology and social media and all the platforms, and then economic strife and struggles in our world, we have to consistently evolve in real time and always understand we don't know everything. We're making decisions as we receive the information. So of course, we're going to struggle. We're going to stumble in the direction of amazingness, And so for us, with me, with the urgency that I have every day, it's just knowing that I have to step in first in providing the positive resources and relationships that my kids need before somebody else jumps in there and doesn't necessarily do it in the best way for us. You know what I'm saying? So, but with an organization is we all have urgency because we're all trying to raise the dollar and everybody is fighting for the same dollar, and so to speak. But it's also making sure that your community knows you are an asset and what you do is vital to the well-being and the culture of your community. And that sets you apart from those organizations that may feel like, I don't know how to navigate this. Maybe I am not essential. We're all essential. I mean, that's why there's thousands of nonprofits in the nation and thousands more being worked on right now and launching. So we have to consider and stay in that mindset that we've got to be urgent in our message.
I got to give Erin a little plug here and Julie, thank you for dropping her episode, because you live in the urgent. I mean, we had a conversation with Erin. It's a beautiful case study of what happened to Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southwest Louisiana after they had 4 natural disasters hit them. You have to lead with urgency when your building is gone. You have to lead with urgency when you don't have a sense of place and that your kids are all over the place. And so I think future proofing is such the great antidote to that. And I want to sort of move into this. How do we move into growth of our cultures rather than grind cultures or sustainable cultures? How do we lead into this failure and celebrate the failure? Now, and I love that you brought that up. And so I want to kick it to you, Brooke. I want you to talk about how leaders can really start to foster this innovation. How do we switch those mindsets? Mm-hmm. How do we start reclaiming our power just a little bit more and infusing that into the culture and the people who work within our mission?
So I, again, love the question, and I'm going to piggyback off of a lot of what you said, Nelvin. I just loved that you focused on sort of adopting this culture of failure. I think that there are 2 things that go hand in hand when we're talking about innovation and adaptation. One is forward-looking and one is sort of catalytic and releasing, right? So the forward-looking is we have to be students of our communities and students of our impact and continue to sit in a learning stance and a learning mindset. Having done this multiple times, I know how easy it is to craft a strategic plan. We have our priorities, we have our goals, we have our objectives, and it becomes this sort of fixed container that we are, head down trudging towards. And the danger there is that we stop listening and observing. And that's where the adaptation comes from, right? That is what fuels our understanding of what we're getting right, what's working, and most importantly, where the gaps are that we have not met, right? We made assumptions going into our strategic vision or into our strategic priorities, and they hopefully were good, well-informed assumptions. And now we have to ask, did we get this right? What did we miss? What are we missing? What are we hearing from the people on the ground that surprises us, right? That we didn't think of. Every 2, 3, 4 years in an organization, the communities around us change. The people in our ecosystem change.
Yes.
So it's a new opportunity to learn, right? Innovation doesn't come from sitting in an office and thinking our own thoughts. It comes from interacting with our donors and constituents, from getting messy and saying, we know we got some things right, and we believe we got some things wrong and missed some things. So how do we learn? So that's the first thing, is the learning and the observing. I think tied to that is the sort of catalytic release. And Nelvin talked really, really eloquently about this. We have to embrace failure organizationally. And I like using the word failure, and I don't, because I think what we actually need to do is talk about growth and innovation adaptation in a way that makes failure one part of that natural process. It isn't a mistake. It is an outgrowth of growth. It is a part of the process. We can't grow and innovate and adapt if we don't fail. And I think that the organizations that I work with that are best at this, at adapting and innovating, are the ones that sit with and explore failure from the top down, right? We invite the whole team to feel safe, bringing up ideas, observing things that aren't working, letting their managers and the board know that they tried something that didn't work. And when we do that, we can unemotionally observe and take lessons learned and move forward. And the last thing that I'll actually say about this is, I think this embracing of failure is particularly important for the leader, for the executive director. It's important organization-wide, but my observation and my experience, both as a leader and a coach, is that it's really hard for leaders to give themselves permission to be vulnerable with their funders and their board, to ask questions, to experiment. They want to look buttoned up. And so they aren't as comfortable saying, I'm going to try this thing. We're going to experiment. I don't know what's going to happen. Here's my educated guess. And I might come back to you in 3 months and tell you it didn't work. That's how we innovate and adapt. And when we really organizationally and as a sector create space for that, then we will continue to grow.
I mean, I got to quote Seth Godin, because I feel like this is such an important piece here.
Yes.
We are uniquely designed as nonprofits to innovate because we are solving for solutions. We're solving for things that we don't have the answers to. So we have to have this posture of trying things and innovating. And so, Amy, I got to kick it to you, because I think this kind of leads to something that we saw really a light from your organization, not just, your collective internally that's thinking about things differently, but how you're also galvanizing community foundations, which on the surface seems so localized. You're galvanizing across the country in really unique ways too, to partner and really drive change on bigger issues. What does that look like?
Well, look, I'm just loving this conversation and this idea that none of us have all the answers, right? And we're all going to fail. And we can't be afraid as donors either to take risk and to experiment. And and also to be responding to the changing world, right? So yes, our superpower as community foundations is we are hyper place-based. There is not an issue in the 8 counties we have not focused on and made a grant about. That said, when we're called to the task of something like climate change, you can't actually solve that in the 8 counties of of downstate New York. It really is the existential threat that calls us as 800 community foundations across this country to find alignment where we can be stronger together and our communities can therefore be stronger together. So yes, over this last year, there are about 50 community foundations who have joined cause around this issue of climate and saying to the federal government, look, you've got all those resources up there. We know the folks on the ground. We've been making these grants for years. We can tell you exactly how this is going to roll in these 8 counties. Trust us. And while we are all hustling to find those resources and get them to our communities, I just want to throw out an example to my excellent partners in Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Columbus, and Indiana, who just landed about $150 million for
Go
solar
team. Dang.
expansion in the heartland of the good old Rust Belt is going to be flourishing with solar resources. So that's some early evidence that I think we're onto something big. And if we can solve for climate in this way, how should we be thinking about affordability? How should we be thinking about housing? How should we be thinking about immigration? Which kind of brings me to my new passion, which Becky and John haven't really heard, but I've been on this tear because we have certain peers, like let's say the state of Michigan, state of Indiana, that have really well-built infrastructure for the community foundations to work together. And what we want to do is do that in New York, especially in response to this extraordinary influx of the newest New Yorkers. We've had 180,000 migrants come through the city in the last 2 years. We are not going to be a welcoming city alone. We are a welcoming state. We are a welcoming country. So how can we leverage those relationships with our community foundations all across New York, many of whom are struggling for labor, for their basic social services? We have 30,000 unfilled agricultural jobs in New York State alone. So how can we as a network help these folks get on to a great life in America? And then finally, I'm going to bring it all the way down to our little donor event, which we had 2 weeks ago here in New York City. You know, I think about the incredible diversity of New York City, and we want our community foundation to be as reflective of that as possible. And we had this incredible meeting of a group of Muslim donors who've been working on a donor advice fund at the New York Community Trust that we've been proud to host since 2016. And we'd never had a chance to sit together and talk about common goals and common purposes. But if there's ever a moment of tension and need in our Jewish communities and our Islamic communities, this is a moment. And I'm going to tell you, talk about, John and Becky always talk about like filling your bucket, sitting in a room full of these folks who have been giving, not just through their donor advice fund at the New York Community Trust, but literally making millions of dollars of cash payments available to folks coming right off the buses, coming into Port Authority, helping people on their way. It was an inspiring night of generosity that I cannot even fully express. And so I just feel like we need to think about community at multiple scales to make sure that we really maximize the potential of what community philanthropy can really be in all of our communities across the United States.
Okay. Applause all around for that. And I even want to pause enough to just compliment you. Thank you, Tyler. Producer is on it. But Amy, I do want to compliment you because that right there is already shifting the power dynamic. When a 100-year-old community foundation flips the script entirely, and I know you've been doing this with listening sessions, not just with your Muslim partners, but I mean, even Gen Z, you ask questions. This is an active listening exercise where people can give you the feedback you need to create the programs and the funding that grow the community. We know this as nonprofiteers, that the solutions to all of our issues are on the front line. And secondly, thank you for the exhale about what's going on with the refugee crisis in New York City. I've been really personally worried about that. Thank you for that. And I want to go in to Erin because Erin, I just think you had a season, and I am thrown by this story of these 4 natural disasters. You were down to $200,000 in your budget, constantly adapting, and now you are thriving. You've had a Mackenzie Scott gift, which is only reflective of brilliant organizations. Yes, get on. We all cried on that one. But I want to talk about the component of resilience because failure is hard and adaptation is hard. Innovation is hard. How do you build that resilience within your teams, especially you, who your team, your org was knocked down multiple times and you kept pivoting? You are a thriving organization now. Teach us your ways.
Yeah. So we were all very affected by the pandemic, which was our first natural disaster. And then 2 major hurricanes, ice storm, flood, and some tornadoes within 18 months. I mean, that's a doozy. And it's, I'm not laughing. I mean, it's funny to say it because I'm like, who experiences that, you know? But for us, it was just a matter, for me, it was a matter of, again, putting people first, you know, and And that was just my kids, my youth, my littles, my staff, my board, my parents, my mentors. And so it literally, all of the preparations that we have as organizations, disaster preparedness or, what have you, literally went out the window in March of 2020. Like, those were very archaic within 24 hours. I didn't even look at it. I was like, this is not real. And so basically it was just mobilization, having conversations with my board, having conversations with my staff. I mean, figuring out Zoom. Like, I had never had Zoom before, so I had to figure that out. And then our mentoring mission is one-to-one, and it's in person. That is 120 years of a mentoring legacy. How can you pivot within 24 hours to non-in-person mentoring? We had to figure that out as a federation as well as an affiliate, but also all the other things that were going on, the building destruction and everything that went along with it. I literally was making those decisions minute to minute based on what's the best decision I can make. How can I ensure my kids are healthy? My staff is healthy. I was worried about them. We were displaced in 2 different offices. My littles were displaced and all over the country with disaster in their homes. Schools were shut down. And I couldn't control all of that. It was way beyond my pay grade. But what I could control was how I reacted as a leader, even though inside, in private, I was just panicking, the anxiety, everything as a leader.
Real.
But I knew that I had to have an outlook of, we can get through this. We got this. We're a team. We're a family. Minute by minute, day by day. Because I knew if my staff and my board saw me panicking, then it's like the Chicken Little in the sky. And as leaders, we can't do that. We can't allow that unless it's just a moment of a breakdown. And my staff and my board saw some of those moments in me because, again, I am human. And like Nelvin said, give ourselves grace. And the failure with BRB, it's like, we're human. We're not perfect. But the resiliency, and John and you, Becky, we talked about this on when we were visiting. Y'all, I don't know where that came from. I'm going to be honest.
Real talk.
I'm going to real talk with everybody. And we're all on this because we're all, visiting these last couple of days to gain knowledge and connection. And I don't know. It just came from somewhere deep inside my belly that came back from when I was a kid that says, don't tell me no. And failure is not an option in my book. So I'm just going to have the little duck feet under the water, paddling everywhere. And I'm going to look kind of calm while I'm freaking out under the water. But that's what we do as nonprofits. And everybody has their own disasters. You lose a major funder. What if one of your only industries in your small region goes under and you just lost $500,000 a year in funding? And you think, oh my gosh, how can I recoup that? You can. Takes some innovation, takes a lot of transparent conversations. But I immediately start working with my donors in March of 2020, having those conversations of, y'all, this is real. This is what we need. We're going to continue to thrive. We're going to continue to mentor. We don't know how we're going to mentor our youth. We're figuring that in real time. But just trust that we're going to continue forward because, again, we are essential in the lives of our youth. And that was the consistent mantra with my team, my community, my funders. Everything that we did was ensuring that front and center, our kids matter. And we are going to have them thrive. And then I just figured it out as I went. So just know you're okay if you don't know what you're doing every day. It's okay. Yeah.
I mean, Erin, thank you for that. I think it definitely stacks with, we're talking about sustainability. You got to have people around you. And I hope if you don't have people around you, I hope that this conference is introducing you to people in the chat or come to the We Are for Good community. Nelvin, I mean, we're starting to wrap up and we got to save time for one good things, but I want to hear how you're using the power of community around your work, because I think even if you feel like you're at the bottom of your bucket, you've got people, you have assets, you have opportunity, and y'all at the Bowery mission are innovating still by tapping people in a unique way with this, associate board that you've brought into. Got to tap Julie Confer over here, representing our producer who's now joined this board. How are you leaning into these new relationships to add community, to bring new vibrance to mission?
Yeah, first of all, we're so happy to have Julie on the associate board. So Julie, thanks for being a part. Shout out to Julie. Yeah, John, like one big way of cultivating growth comes back to people, you know, and it's not just the people we serve, but the people running in and alongside your organization. I love this sector so much, the social sector so much, but I think it's one of the most underutilized tools in nonprofits belt. You know, people want to do more. They need a way to do that. The associate board is one of my favorite parts of working here. Bowery Mission's associate board is a community of just passionate young professionals who are committed to making a change in the communities that they work in. You know, these are people in their 20s and 30s who already work 40, 50, 60, 80-hour weeks, you know, but they're so committed to change. They're so committed to the city that they still want to make giving back a part of their life, you know, and it's so important because there's such a focus on impact and such a focus on empowering the next generation, bringing them closer to us and letting them be a part of that change. You know, and I'll share real quick through our associate board's structure and culture of creating the biggest net impact. It goes deeper than just what one individual can contribute. We constantly see them engaging their corporate teams, their colleagues, their friends, their family. And just to put into perspective, a group of 50 people in the last few years have volunteered over multiple thousands of hours.
Wow.
Just by themselves, you know, and last year alone, they've created an incredible net impact of close to $500,000 for our organization.
We call that impact uprising right there. It starts one-to-one, human to human, community by community, one idea at a time. And which makes me want to lift Allison's question is like, do we have some future-proofing resources? That's not just a question for the panelists. They don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers, but the collective, the community can source these answers. So if you have any of these resources, any of these tips, please drop them in the chat, because we are rounding out into our one good thing. We end all of our conversations with this. And I want to start, Amy, with you. Like, tell us, what is one good thing somebody could take away from this conversation today, and what's vibing with you?
I wish I could just like give a virtual hug to everybody in this room, because I'm just loving these people, and I'm gonna make that my one good thing. I think ultimately we are a people business, right? And now this might seem a little ironic saying this in a virtual room, where we've all come together, people we couldn't have otherwise all gotten together without a huge carbon footprint and a lot of wasted money, blah, blah, blah. So this is awesome. But when we can be in person with one another, I'm just coming off 3 days with my colleague, Community Foundation leaders, fighting for our DAFs in Washington, and the community was so powerful of being together and just being side by side and fighting the good fight together. I'm loving the people in person together. So when we can, let's reach out and touch one another in the most sort of appropriate way. But the idea that we can, because we are a people business, and philanthropy is this joyful thing, and we should be engaged in that in a really human way with one another. That's my one good thing.
Brilliant tone setting for there. Brooke, I want to go to you next.
You're muted.
Muted.
There we go. I'm going to build on that and say my one good thing is energy. I think that, you know, there's just, even though we are virtual, this incredible energy, like I'm feeling that sort of buzz you get when you're just like, I could talk to you guys for another 5 hours. And you know, building on what you were saying, Amy, we're energetic beings. And when we can be in community, when we can vibe with one another and hear good ideas and celebrate what we're all doing, I think that energy fuels us, you know, and when we talk about sustainability, that's what we need, is positive energy. So
you guys are 100% bringing that. And you, Julie, for dropping the link to the We Are for Good community. If you don't have community, if you are feeling alone, come into ours. It is such an incredible group of heart-wired humans, just like these 4 individuals who want to be the change in the world. Drop your LinkedIns. Let's all connect with each other. The interconnectivity of how the Impact Uprising grows is based on our ability to lean in and connect. So, Erin, I want to bring it to you. What have you got? One good thing.
Oh, you know that's so hard. Y'all put me. This is the most stressful moment ever with the conversation. One good thing from today is the conversations that we had and hearing these 3 amazing panelists that I was totally fangirling, reading everything about them before I got on here. Is just, it solidifies that sometimes I feel so alone and isolated in this role. Because I feel like, again, I have to, as a leader, like you are the leader, you can't make the mistakes. You can't, you have to, the expectation. And it really allowed me, when I sit back and I'm in these conversations, whether I'm a panelist or I'm a viewer, is that, I'm not alone in that,
You're not.
and it just makes me feel better as a leader, because I am my worst critic as a leader. And I'm always thinking about everybody else but myself. And of course, that's what leadership is. But I also need to understand, when I give my staff grace or my board members grace, I need to always give myself the same grace. And that is so humbling. And so when I look at these people and I'm reading the chat, and I've been all over the chat today and looking at what everybody's saying, it's like, y'all, I'm okay. I'm actually doing good today. And I can bring that energy back to the people that need me to be the best version of myself, but also needs me to be honest and say, y'all, I'm just totally messing up right now. Just help me. Yeah.
Bringing us back to self-love. Nelvin, bring us home. What you got?
Oh, it's along the same lines of what everybody's been saying already, but I think back to the title of the session, one of the words, it's disrupt. And I love that word so much. We're all part of ambitious organizations, and that's what initially draws us to the organization that you're in, right? But keep thinking about, how do places actually disrupt? And it starts with an audacious mission, but it trickles down to the people that form the teams that tackle those missions. I think that if we want to future-proof our organizations, we need to start by future-proofing our people, and it's not just salary. I'm talking about tailoring professional development, tailoring work-life balance, figuring out what matters most to your people, proving that they matter the most to you. So just have conversations with your people. Your missions fall flat without them.
Hope is
Oh
blooming.
my gosh. My one good thing is go follow all these people and get in community and get served and uplifted by the way they share online and show up online. It's so authentic. Y'all, my heart is full. As we close this out, I got to thank the sponsors that powered this. Thank you for creating an open, inclusive platform for all of us to get together today. Microsoft, Feather, Community Boost, One Cause, Classy, Windfall, Amphil, and Cause Camp. Really, grateful for you powering these conversations. And friends, this is the end of the conversation.
This is the end, but it's not the end.
Let's not end.
Yes. Please join us over on main stage. We're going to listen to Sonia Perez Lauterbach bring us home. It is going to be a conversation of healing, self-love. It's going to be an extension of what this conversation is. Thank you, 4 incredible humans, for the work you're doing. Thank you to you in the chat. Keep going. Keep riding that wave of hope. We've got it.
So grateful, friends.
Thank you all.